Welcome back to Amazing Stories. Today we're going to dive right into the surrender of the Guzmán Lora family. How was this incredible feat organized? All the details coming up next. Join me. On May 12, 2025, under a brutally clear sky, with the sun bouncing off the asphalt like a knife. Friday seemed like just another day at the San Isidro border, until it wasn't. It was 12:07 in the afternoon when a caravan of luxury armored vehicles, black, polished, impenetrable, began to slowly approach the checkpoint between Tijuana and San Diego. At first, the border agents thought it was a group of businessmen or maybe a politician on a private visit, but something didn't add up. Their expressions weren't arrogant, but nervous, their faces pale and tense, and in their eyes, a mix of defeat and urgency. When the doors opened, there was complete silence. One by one, 17 members of Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán's family got out, sons, sisters-in-law, nephews. They didn't come as visitors, they came as fugitives, as heirs to a throne built on blood, now begging for protection from what they themselves helped create. The scene was as surreal as it was symbolic. The descendants of Mexico's most infamous drug lord surrendering voluntarily to the security team led by Omar Garcia Harfuch. A surrender without gunfire, without sirens, but heavy with history. What secrets do they bring with them, and what does this act mean for the future of the Guzmán Empire? They weren't just any group. As they stepped out of the armored SUVs, the heat of the California desert wasn't the only thing burning. The weight of their last names was burning too. Leading the caravan was Griselda Lopez Perez, El Chapo's ex-wife, wrapped in a designer coat despite the 90-degree heat. Behind her was Rosa Isela Guzmán, the eldest daughter. Isela Guzmán, the niece who managed real estate businesses in Sinaloa and Jalisco for years. And at the end, with a steady gaze and restrained gestures, a young man in a dark cap, jeans, and Balenciaga sneakers. He is believed to be Jesus Alfredo Guzmán Salazar, also known as El Gordo, one of the natural heirs to the cartel. The suitcases, at least 12 of them, were Louis Vuitton, Chanel, and Rimowa, not filled with clothes or weapons, but with photographs, documents, collectible watches, and personal belongings. Memories of a life that once seemed untouchable. Even though they were on the run, luxury traveled with them. A brutal contradiction. The symbols of the power that brought them down were now the only things they wanted to save. The fake diplomatic passports found by immigration agents had stamps from Dubai, Moscow, Quito, and Caracas, but everyone knew that the final destination wasn't a city, it was a refuge, an escape, a deal. How much do these golden faces really know about the secrets of the narco-state, and what price are they willing to pay for a new beginning? While the spotlights were focused on the San Isidro Bridge, the real operation was being woven in the shadows. Omar Garcia Harfuch didn't just know what was coming, he had orchestrated it. For weeks beforehand, secret meetings had been held in an armored room on the 17th floor of the SSPC bunker on Paseo de la Reforma, with agents from the FBI and the DEA. Under the highest level of confidentiality, a surgical strategy was devised. 0 bullets, 0 deaths, but a lethal blow to the symbolic heart of the Guzmán Empire. On May 8th, Harfuch received the key call from Langley, Virginia. That's where the location and exact timing of the handover were confirmed. The instruction was clear: allow the passage without causing a scene, but record every move. What seemed like a simple family surrender was, in reality, the masterpiece of a binational operation, dismantling the Chapo myth from within. The logistical details were as precise as they were cold. 3 Black Hawk helicopters on standby in Central California, 2 DEA rapid response teams ready at Otay Mesa and in the rear, and a digital tracking device placed on the vehicles. This allowed access to their routes, contacts, and travel habits over the past 3 months. Harfich didn't appear on camera, didn't make any statements, but his influence was present in every decision. His goal wasn't the show. It was to break the cartel's spirit without firing a single shot. Can a bloodless blow dismantle what decades of violence failed to bring down? The escape didn't start in San Isidro. It began in the fortified heart of Jesus Maria, the stronghold where El Chapo was born and which, until recently, was considered untouchable territory. There, surrounded by electrified walls, thermal cameras, and secret tunnels, the Guzmán family made the most radical decision in their history, to abandon their own empire. At 3:12 in the morning on May 6th, under a reddish moon and an almost ghostly silence, they left in 3 armored 2023 Suburbans. Each vehicle had level 6 armor, cloned license plates from agricultural companies in northern Sinaloa, and pre-programmed routes to avoid checkpoints. They crossed through Bataraguado without stopping, passed through Guamuchil, and avoided Culiacan entirely, diverting toward a private hangar in Navalado. There, on a clandestine airstrip, the same one where small planes once took off loaded with cocaine, they boarded a Gulfstream 200 jet bound for Tijuana, a trip of about 1,500 kilometers. The plan was fast, leaving no room for mistakes, from the stronghold to the border in less than 9 hours. But in San Isidro, the risk was still present. DEA agents, Mexican Marines, and 2 elite snipers from the Special Intervention Group were waiting in strategic positions. The fear wasn't of an official attack, but of a betrayal from within. Cells loyal to the Chapitos that still operate independently could ambush them at any moment. For some, the escape was seen as an unforgivable betrayal. The most critical moment came at 12:30 in the afternoon, when a black SUV without license plates tried to speed up toward the convoy. Just 2 hand signals from the escorts were enough to activate the protocol. Total lockdown of the perimeter. Laser sights aimed at the windshield. Deployment of mobile barriers. There were no gunshots, but the message was clear: no one comes in, no one goes out. That day, in silence and under maximum tension, a chapter came to a close. The Guzmáns left their homeland for the last time, and they did so knowing that the next step was no longer up to them, but depended on the deal that others were already negotiating on their behalf. How far can an escape go when what's at stake isn't freedom, but historical forgiveness? While the Guzmán Lora caravan crossed the border and the media spotlights focused on San Isidro, in a sealed room inside the FBI's Hoover building in Washington, D.C., one of the most explosive agreements in the recent history of the fight against drug trafficking was being signed. The Pact of Ovidio Guzmán Lopez, also known as El Ratón, a pact that didn't come from goodwill, but from fear. Fear of extradition, fear of betrayal from within, and above all, fear of dying in a cell without a face or a name. According to sources consulted by the agency, Ovidio, imprisoned in a federal jail in Illinois since his surrender in January 2024, had begun talks with Department of Justice prosecutors 6 months earlier. He did it through his legal defense, but with one non-negotiable condition: full protection for his immediate family, including siblings, aunts, cousins, and unidentified associates. This wasn't an ordinary confession. It was a negotiation that was structured, timed, and drafted down to the last detail. In exchange for becoming a cooperating witness, Ovidio offered the complete map of the most sensitive operations of the Sinaloa Cartel and the CJNG. Routes for transporting fentanyl through the port of Manzanillo, names of corrupt officers within the National Guard, money laundering schemes using construction companies in Cancun, and most sensitive of all, a blacklist of active politicians who received direct bribes in the last 5 years. Some of them are now presidential candidates. The agreement included shocking clauses. First, relocation under the Federal Witness Protection Program for at least 31 people. Second, new identities and U.S. citizenship for immediate family members. Third, partial immunity for crimes committed before 2021, as long as they did not involve homicides or acts of terrorism. A silent scandal, but one with seismic effects on both sides of the border. Omar Garcia Harfuch himself, although he did not participate directly in the meetings in Washington, was kept informed step by step by intelligence liaisons. He knew that this pact was the only way to dismantle the power structures that had survived even after El Chapo's downfall. In private, Harfuch described it as the final chess move. A cold, risky, but strategic move to break decades of bought loyalties. But not everyone agreed. Within the FBI's hardline faction, there was resistance. "We're legalizing high-profile criminals," said one agent anonymously. In Mexico, federal prosecutors were outraged at the possibility of seeing Ovidio become a protected U.S. citizen, while thousands of victims of the war on drugs still have no justice. However, the State Department approved the deal under a brutal premise. Better to have one criminal talking from Virginia than 100 hitmen operating out of Culiacan. The cartel's reaction was immediate. As soon as rumors of the deal leaked, several mid-level operators disappeared, heading toward Guatemala, El Salvador, and Colombia. Internal purges were triggered within cells in Tijuana, Nogales, and Guadalajara. The deal didn't just spark panic, it completely reshaped the map of organized crime. At its core, what was being woven wasn't just a legal agreement. It was a new order in which surrender becomes salvation and truth, a bargaining chip. Can justice really be built on deals with the very architects of horror? And what price are we, as a society, willing to pay to dismantle an empire without spilling another drop of blood? While the Guzmán family crossed the threshold into U.S. protection, in Sinaloa, the land was burning. Jesus Maria, Badiraguato, Culiacan, every historic stronghold of the cartel was engulfed in a storm of fire, betrayal, and revenge. What began as a quiet internal rift between factions turned, within weeks, into an all-out war for control of El Chapo's criminal legacy. The split with the Jalisco New Generation cartel, once an ally, now a declared enemy, marked the beginning. Failed shipments, seizures in Manzanillo, and targeted killings in Mazatlan and Los Machas set off a chain reaction. The Chapitos blamed their old allies, and the old allies blamed the Guzmans. Caught in the middle were hundreds of hitmen with no clear loyalties, armed with American weapons and vague orders. In just 3 months, more than 200 violent murders were recorded in the region. Men executed in broad daylight, women abducted, bodies hung from bridges with cryptic messages. Betrayal is paid for in blood. In Chua, an ambush using explosive drones claimed the lives of 6 members of the National Guard. In Guasave, a convoy of the Ninis was attacked by a splinter group, now allied with the CJNG. The message was clear. The war was no longer against the state, but among themselves. And while the streets filled with shell casings and fear became routine, the news tightened around Jesus Maria, the symbolic stronghold of the Guzmán family. Surrounded by dissident cells, with no resources or safe routes, the family realized that their time in power was over. Organized crime as a model was beginning to collapse from within. What the Navy couldn't accomplish was being achieved by betrayals. Federal intelligence services, in coordination with the DA, documented at least 17 internal betrayals in the last 90 days. Plaza bosses who abandoned their territories and negotiated immunity in exchange for coordinates, labs, or shipments. They were no longer fighting over money. They were fighting to survive. This context was key in precipitating the surrender. The family didn't escape just out of strategy. They escaped because staying meant dying at the hands of their own people. A criminal empire collapses not when the state destroys it, but when there's no one left willing to die for it. Is this the end of the Guzmán dynasty? Or is it just the beginning of its transformation under new masks and other cities with new names? And who will pick up the pieces of a Sinaloa that no longer knows who it belongs to? While headlines around the world exploded with the news of the Guzmán family's surrender, Omar Garcia Harfuch wasn't giving press conferences or posing for the cameras. He didn't need to. His strategy was different, silent, surgical, and above all, effective. From the very beginning, he knew he was facing a historic moment. It wasn't about capturing bodies, but about dismantling structures. And that is done in the shadows. Stationed in a situation room in the control tower of the National Intelligence Center, NBB, on Ejército Nacional, Harfuch tracked every movement of the convoy from Jesus Maria to San Isidro. He coordinated with liaison officers from the FBI and the DEA, but also maintained direct contact with President Claudia Sheinbaum, who had given the green light to the operation with one non-negotiable condition: no bloodshed, no unnecessary noise, and no turning justice into a spectacle. And that's exactly how it went. Not a single shot fired, not a single official tweet. While social media was flooded with rumors and theories, the federal government remained completely silent. A silence that wasn't weakness, but strategy. Because in a country where the truth often crashes against the noise, silence becomes a tool of power. Harfuch knew this. That's why he prevented leaks, secured the reports, and restricted the circulation of names, even within the security cabinet. His team operated like an autonomous cell: 5 intelligence agents, 3 cyber operators, and a diplomatic liaison with the U.S. Embassy, all under strict confidentiality. The goal wasn't to show strength, but to break the enemy from within. To use fear, division, and legal pressure as weapons for dismantling. A Cold War right in the heart of Sinaloa. In confidential words leaked by a close advisor, Harfuch summed up his tactic in a blunt phrase, without any heroics. Omar Garcia Harfuch, you don't kill the cartel with bullets, you kill it with data and timely agreements. This new security doctrine marks a radical shift. In contrast to the militarized spectacle of previous administrations, Harfuch proposes a strategy based on precision, stealth, and international coordination. What used to be resolved with televised operations is now decided in meetings sealed by silence. Can a nation win a war without showing its weapons? And what will happen when the enemies start to talk and the allies start to tremble? On the surface, nothing was signed, nothing was announced, no one applauded. But in the diplomatic corridors between Mexico City and Washington, D.C., one of the most precise choreographies of recent years was carried out. A silent dance between two governments that, without declaring it, shared the same goal: to dismantle the legacy of the Sinaloa Cartel from within. While the Guzmán family was crossing the San Isidro International Bridge, a special delegation from the U.S. Department of Justice was already waiting for them with sealed orders, assigned transfers, and routes pre-approved by the Witness Protection Program. On the other side, in the National Palace, the order was clear: do not intervene, do not make statements, do not provoke. Every step was timed to the second. Mexico allowed the departure. The United States carried out the judicial process. Both sides shared critical information without signatures or spotlights. Only results. The new phase of cooperation doesn't need treaties. It needs shared intelligence and silent complicity. Because real power isn't shouted, it's negotiated in hushed tones. Are we witnessing a temporary alliance or the birth of a lasting binational strategy? And what other truths might come to light if this dance continues? Ever since the airplane door closed at Andrews, the Guzmán family began a life of forced reinvention under federal protection in the United States, with new identities and quiet lives in different parts of the country, far from the vast empire they once controlled. Some resist the change, clinging to the past. Others, like Jesus Alfredo, seem to adapt, although reintegration never fully erases the shadows of who they once were. Meanwhile, the family's surrender, especially Ovidio Guzmán's testimony from his cell, has triggered the collapse of the Sinaloa Cartel. The information revealed has made it possible to dismantle operations, freeze accounts, and arrest key operators, eroding the structure from within. However, this breakdown does not promise a peaceful future. The cartel's fragmentation is giving rise to emerging groups that are more violent and lack the old codes. The end of this era is shaping up to be a bloody process. This moment, also marked by more strategic approaches against crime, such as those attributed to Omar Garcia Harfuch, presents a crossroads for Mexico. The fall of the Sinaloa Cartel offers a historic opportunity. But the real challenge is whether society and the state are ready to build a different future, one based on justice and not on fear. The surrender in San Isidro symbolizes the end of a dynasty, but it also raises the question, is true transformation possible when the echoes of power and violence still linger? The opportunity exists, but it requires a collective decision to break the cycle. And with that, we've finished telling you about the current state of the Sinaloa Cartel. What do you think? Is this the end? Or did it just disband until a new leader emerges? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And thank you so much for being here. Until the next amazing story.